Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Green Drinks. My name is Brittany Ebling. I am the Deputy Director at Berkshire Environmental Action Team, or BEAT. We are a small grassroots environmental nonprofit based in Pittsfield, and we work throughout Berkshire County to protect wildlife in support of the natural world that sustains us all. I'm joined tonight by my wonderful colleagues Chelsea and Andrew, who make these events possible and do all the great work to put this together. And we're also so grateful to be joined this evening by Laura Orlando, who has traveled a very long way to be with us. So we're extremely grateful for her presence and the work that she does as a senior scientist at Just Zero, where we collaborate on working in the Coalition for Sludge-Free Land, a national coalition which Laura has been instrumental in creating. Laura is also a professor of public health, of environmental science in the School of Public Health at Boston University. And we are just so grateful that she has taken the time to travel here to be here in person, because we feel that holding these conversations in person and with folks tuning in virtually allows us to really consider and contemplate these important questions as a community, especially on an issue like this, where including in the town where we are holding this event tonight, we're really being affected by this issue, as is the case throughout Berkshire County and beyond. So if you are able to support BEAT through a gift, a donation, so that we can continue doing this type of free programming, making this type of work accessible to everyone in our community, we have a real commitment to accessibility and to making all of our educational and outreach work free to community members. We also have, just to keep on your calendar, an upcoming Green Drinks event next month, which is going to be about Breathe Easy, our air quality monitoring program that is funded by a 3-year EPA grant. And my coworkers Andrew and Drake, who oversee this program, are going to be speaking and sharing some of what they've been doing to collect data over the past several years and what that means for working toward environmental justice-based solutions around air quality in Pittsfield and the Berkshires at large. So with that, I will pass it to Laura, who's going to speak for a while, and then we'll take a significant amount of time for questions and answers. We'll pass around the microphone that's attached to me here so that those tuning in online can hear the questions. So please be patient as we bring the microphone to you. And we'll also read aloud questions from the online participation by Zoom. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I am very glad to be here. Thank you for coming. Thank you, BEAT, for inviting me. And we're going to take a deep dive into PFAS, which are also called forever chemicals. How many of you here have heard of PFAS? That's exactly why we're able to talk about it, because it's a concern of tens of millions of Americans in rural areas and in urban places. In 2016, I wrote an article for In These Times magazine called "Your Water Could Be Worse Than Flint's." And it was about the Flint water crisis, where lead leached out of the drinking water pipes, and over 8,000 children were poisoned because of the lead poisoning. And that happened because of engineering and administrative malfeasance, right? It happened because a lot of mistakes were made, and politics got in the way of what we know about how to treat water and prevent that kind of thing from happening. But the question I have is, why was there lead in the pipes to begin with? And because in 1890, the Massachusetts Board of Health recommended, I said 1890, recommended that Massachusetts towns and cities not use lead pipe. 100+ years ago, we knew lead was a neurotoxin and caused profound troubles, especially in children. By the 1920s, lead had been banned in cities and towns across the country. But in 1928, an organization was formed by the handful of companies that were peddling lead, including making lead pipes, and it was called the Lead Industries Association, 1928. They were able to push back those bans and keep lead in pipes until 1986. That's when lead was finally banned from drinking water pipes in America. We're in a similar situation with PFAS. We have a profoundly dangerous family of chemicals where they are particularly damaging in our drinking water, because that's where we get heavy loads of them. When there's a lot of PFAS in the drinking water, and you don't need a lot to have it cause troubles, I'll get into that a bit, but it causes just tremendous negative adverse health effects in especially children, but in adults as well. And again, in both rural and in urban communities. And so I want to talk a little bit to just bring everybody up to speed about what these chemicals are, and especially what we can do about them in our own communities and in our own households and in our own politics and in our own lives. So a nickname for these per and polyfluoroalkyl substances is forever chemicals. Why? Because they don't go away. They stick around in our bodies for years, and there's over 15,000 of them. One thing they have in common is a carbon-fluorine bond. That carbon-fluorine bond is not found in nature. It was initially found in the laboratories of DuPont Chemical Company in the 1940s. DuPont knew decades ago how dangerous carbon-fluorine bonded chemicals are, how dangerous they are to people, right? And they kept that secret. And this is what the movie Dark Waters is about, right? Rob Belote is the lawyer who brought all of this to light through discovery, through a legal trial that he was engaged in against DuPont. And we don't know a whole lot about all 15,000 of them. We can only test for, depending on what testing method one uses, we can test for about 40 of them, 29 in drinking water, 40 in matrices like sewage sludge and landfill leachate. And when I say we can test, that those tests are approved by the EPA and the scientific community in terms of their rigor of what they're showing. They bioaccumulate, you know, one thing eats another, it's another eats another, you get more and more PFAS. They're toxic, they're mobile, they can move through water. You know, once they're on soil, they can move into drinking water, into the root shoots and fruits of plants, and they're very persistent. They are found in water, soil, and air, and that there is a really good understanding now, which is another reason we're all here talking today, of how terrible they are for human health. And this is an agreement in the scientific literature, and it's an agreement with the federal government in data that in reports published by the government. Where do we find PFAS? Fracking sites, airports, pizza boxes, anything that's like grease or stain resistant often will have some kind of PFAS in it. Contaminated water, cosmetics, farms where sewage sludge was disposed of, food grown with sludge, gardens that use sludge, water-resistant clothes, some dental floss like Oral-B, their Glide, factories that manufacture or blend chemicals together to make PFAS, and landfills. Now, this is an important for me, and maybe for you, this is an important little drawing where the sources of PFAS are direct and indirect. So the direct is the industrial manufacturing, right? In the firefighting foams that encapsulate the fire, that work really, really well to smother the fires. And they're used at military bases, anywhere there's aircraft. And not that there are that many fires, but there's a lot of training where they use this foam to train firefighters on how to put out these fires. And that foam goes all over the place. And so you'll find it at airports all over the country, in military bases. You'll find PFAS. And then the waste related, which is my business. When it rains, the precipitation that runs through landfills is called landfill leachate. Many landfills, not all, but many are lined. All lined landfills leak, important thing to remember. But millions of gallons of this garbage soup is collected, depending on how large the landfill is, put in tanks and then brought to wastewater treatment plants. This landfill leachate is just loaded with thousands of different kinds of PFAS. And then wastewater treatment plants, of which every sewer in America has a treatment plant. And there are two byproducts from wastewater treatment. There is the treated wastewater, which is technically called the effluent. And that's the stuff you're trying to clean. That's the stuff that the rules and regulations say you have to get this much bacteria out, this many nutrients. And that treatment is really focused on the nutrients. It is not focused on the industrial chemicals that go into the wastewater treatment plant, nor has it ever been, nor can it be. That's a really important thing to remember in this. So there's around 17,000 wastewater treatment plants in the country. As you can imagine, the largest ones are in the big cities. Boston has one of the largest in the world. Boston, Chicago, the District of Columbia. And Boston isn't just Boston, it's 43 neighboring communities. So it's greater Boston, up to Gloucester, includes Cambridge, other points west, points south. So, that wastewater treatment plant generates, moves through about 350 million gallons of wastewater a day, disgorges it, at least when it's not raining, into the Atlantic Ocean. And then there's a second byproduct, apart from that effluent, that treated wastewater, which is a residual. It's a leftover, unwanted byproduct of sewage treatment, and that's called sewage sludge. And that's really important in this conversation because sewage sludge is generated by all wastewater treatment plants. And Deer Island, for instance, in Boston, generates, once it's processed, dried, by process I mean dewatered and dried, 100 tons a day. That's a lot of sewage sludge. And it is, there's thousands of peer-reviewed papers. I have 998 of them memorized that show the many constituents, dangerous chemicals that are in sewage sludge. Because the point is not to treat the sewage sludge, right? And it's incidental. Remember I said synthetic chemicals are not treated in wastewater treatment plants. It's a big chemistry set. So those chemicals that like solids will partition over to the solids. Those that don't, caffeine and ibuprofen, for example, will stay in the water column. And so sewage sludge, an industry term for sewage sludge is biosolids. And keep that in mind because it's going to come back to like what you can do about this. Sewage sludge always, okay, I'm purposefully using that word, has forever chemicals in it, okay, and in high concentrations. And not because those chemicals are coming from our bodies. Remember I said we hang on to these forever chemicals. We don't excrete them. It takes a long time for us to move them through our bodies, right? And so is some component coming from humans? Sure. But millions of pounds of PFAS chemicals, metal plating, textile industry, the landfill leachate, all of this stuff goes into the sewer. And a lot of it collects in the sewage sludge. The PFAS collects in the sewage sludge, in microplastics too, another talk. But that's trouble. That's trouble. But the real trouble in terms of our drinking water and our food and the health of our communities is in Massachusetts, in every state but Maine and Connecticut, that sewage sludge, it is legal to be put on land, to be disposed of on land. The regulatory language is beneficial use, but it's not beneficial for drinking water quality, food quality, wildlife, or the health of ourselves, our friends, and our neighbors. And so one of the things that I'm working with BEAT, I'm working with the Coalition for Sludge-Free Land, which has members from across the country. I'm working with a lot of different people, and a lot of people have put in a lot of effort in preventing the land application of sewage sludge. We need to stop that. That's like easy. I mean, it's hard. We've been unsuccessful for 30 years, but we're gonna keep at it. And because you know something has PFAS in it, you know how dangerous PFAS are, why are you putting it on your land? Farmers do it farmers are often told by their states, if you go to the Massachusetts DEC webpage right now, they'll say how great this stuff is, right? It's regulated. It's regulated for 9 heavy metals. Isn't that amazing? And some pathogens. It's not regulated for any microplastics. It's not regulated for PFAS. And you can just go down the list of problematic synthetic chemicals that are in it. But you know, that's one of the primary source of PFAS pollution. Why do we care? I mean, it's a whole list of troubles that I'm not even getting into wildlife and soil health and plant health, but PFAS can cause kidney cancer, testicular cancer, breast cancer, that damages the liver, thyroid, cardiovascular troubles. Allison Jumper in New Hampshire was eating, her family, her mother-in-law and father-in-law have an organic dairy in Maine, and they were eating the meat. And she's got 3 boys, and they went to the doctor and they had high cholesterol levels through the roof, like shocking. And couldn't figure out what it was, and they finally tested the meat in the freezer, and the meat was poisoned with PFAS. Now, you cannot use sewage sludge on organic farms and have organic certification. But her in-laws' farm had a sludge spreading on it decades before they bought it. Forever chemicals, remember? It sticks, the chemicals stick around. And they stopped eating. One of the things that happened in that particular family, Allison's part of this coalition, and she's working in her own state and elsewhere to try to end the land application of sludge. But one of the things, her boys, they stopped eating the meat, right? And the PFAS levels in their blood serum has lowered and lowered and lowered, right? So that if you can figure out the source, you can address the burden on the body. A report just came out like a couple weeks ago by the Waterkeeper Alliance, a national organization that they looked at surface waters upstream and downstream of wastewater treatment plants and fields that had received sludge. And to no one's surprise, there was more PFAS downstream than upstream, because the PFAS partitions both into the effluent, into the treated wastewater, and also the sewage sludge. And in 5,100% increase of PFAS downstream of where sewage sludge was spread on land. An EPA draft risk assessment was published in January of 2025 at the last minutes of the Biden administration that says, and they only looked at 2 of what are called the legacy PFAS, PFOA, which is Teflon, right? That's one of the products. That it's a 8-chain PFAS, and the other is a PFOS, which is always in sewage sludge. And they said in this draft risk assessment, very, very interesting, smart document, that one application of sewage sludge on a farm at agronomic rates approved by the EPA will cause significant harm to the health of anyone in the farm family, and they didn't broaden this, but essentially anyone eating the food off of that farm. And we're talking like 1 egg a day. They're not talking about other PFAS in the blood of the farm family. And so what that draft risk assessment is showing is just how dangerous the land application of sewage sludge is to the water drinkers and the eaters that live near or on those farms. Massachusetts, over 100 drinking water systems are contaminated with PFAS. The United States Geological Service did a survey with the Mass government, and they found that all 27 river samples downstream for wastewater treatment plants had high levels of PFAS in it. So what do you do about it, right? What do we do about this? Sandra Steingraber, y'all know Sandra Steingraber? She's an author, wonderful author, and she's written a few books, but one of them is called Raising Elijah, and she talks about a syndrome, if you will, called well-informed futility, and it was that language was coined during the Vietnam War when people were overwhelmed with the images of dead soldiers, and when they began to feel really what was happening in that war, people shut down. And I think we see it with the climate catastrophe. And we can feel it with this, in conversation. I can feel it in rooms and audiences that I talk to about PFAS. Here it is, it's dangerous, it's everywhere, it's in most of us. What do we do? And what Sandra says to do is act. She says that's the way to get out of the paralysis. Act and do something. And her example is join the French resistance, right? So we all do need to join the French resistance on this. But the uptake in plants is highly variable. The more carbon in the soil, the less plant uptake there is. As that carbon is used up, that long chain PFAS, for example, will go up into the plants. So that's a very complex story, but the core piece of that story is, it goes up into the food we eat. It goes into the milk we drink. If the cows are eating, if their pasture has received sewage sludge, or if they're eating hay that is from a sludged field. So what can we do about it? Firstly, grow using organic principles if you can. There are bagged products. I went to Agway today, and Agway, I love Agway. My daughter's here, she knows it's a pilgrimage I make every time I'm here. And they have a product there, and this is not to diss Agway, because Ace Hardware has it, Home Depot has it, many places, but it's called Milorganite. And it's 32-pound bag, says, I forget what it is, 640, NPK, fertilizer. I think they sell it for 20 something a bag. It is a sludge-derived product from the Milwaukee sanitary district. And when I said something at Agway about it today, they said, well, it's not labeled organic. And that's absolutely right. But just, you can label things organic and they don't have to be organic. It's the farmer that has to know, or the grower that has to know. So the organic regulations aren't about the labeling of products. And, but that's a different story. But so right here, right, at least in Great Barrington, a sludge-derived product is being sold. And people have no idea that it's loaded with microplastics and PFAS and other dangerous chemicals. And so one of the things at the Coalition for Sludge-Free Land that we want to do is end the land application of sludge and stop the sale or the giveaway, because they give this stuff away, of sludge-derived products. And I have a whole list of them here. There's a bunch of them around the country. And it's a lot to ask growers, whether you're garden or landscapers or farmers. It's a lot to ask people to know all these different product names, and they change. It's not so hard to say, look, don't sell this to the people. We need to stop this, at the source, as it were. And read the ingredients on a bag of fertilizer or soil amendment that you get, or ask your landscaper if they're using some kind of compost. If you don't know what the ingredients are, don't buy it, right? If it says biosolids, absolutely don't buy it. If it talks about wastewater residual on the bag, don't buy it. But they don't have to put that on the bag. They can just, I've seen bags that say made with compost. Well, that's not very helpful, right? And because one way to linguistically detoxify sewage sludge is to compost it and then sell it as a compost. Right. Another thing you can do is get behind this bill. An act protecting our soil and farms from PFAS contamination, sponsored by Joe Comerford and Representative Irena DeRosa. And it bans land application. It establishes a PFAS relief fund. It's really important that we support our farmers. And Maine has taken the lead on this in terms of the sewage sludge related catastrophe. Maine has banned the land application of sewage sludge. They've put tens of millions of dollars into a fund to support PFAS impacted farmers, in some cases helping buy the farm if it's absolutely hopeless, or helping them transition into a product that they can still grow and not poison the people that eat it or use it, or the animals that eat it or use it. And so we're trying to do the same thing here. And another thing Maine does is for farmers that want their land and water tested or milk, they do it. And then when they find PFAS contamination, they work through what kind of filtration system, for instance, in the water, can they use. And like a point of entry system is all the water that comes into the house. And those require a lot of maintenance. So the state of Maine pays for that maintenance. And that's something we could do here in Massachusetts. In terms of rural communities, people on wells, well water is not regulated. And so what you should know, what you explore if there is some kind of PFAS contamination nearby. If you live near an airport, I would probably test my drinking water. If you live near a landfill, within a mile of a landfill, I would test my well water. If there's any reason you think someone is using sewage sludge on a field near your property, I would have my water tested for PFAS. And I know Maine has some pretty great stuff on their website, and we're going to try to build on the state's website around water testing, and people can reach out to me about that. But the problem is it's on the homeowners, nickel to get that done. So it seems obvious, but you gotta be careful in this stuff because it seems obvious that this family of chemicals should not be so ubiquitous. It is, but they are. There's 6 companies in this country that manufacture PFAS. 6. One of them's 3M. In 2023, 3M said that they made $200 million manufacturing out of a $1.3 billion in revenue. They made 16% profit for $200 million. Milorganite made $12 million. The Milwaukee Sanitary District made $12 million off of selling millions of these little bags of PFAS, right? EPA estimates it's going to cost $1.5 billion a year to just meet the drinking water regulations for what were 6 PFAS, and now in the new administration is whittled down to 2. But just to address those 2 PFAS in our drinking water, we're talking, $1.5 billion a year. Why are we selling, why is there bagged sewage sludge? This is not a lot of money being made off this, but we, the public, are paying the price, both in our health and our tax dollars and our water bills, right? Regulate PFAS as a class of chemicals, not one by one. A whole class of chemicals, because they behave the same. Ban the land application of sewage sludge. Don't let it be used as a fertilizer. About half of it goes to landfills. All of it needs to go to landfills. And then we need to work to reduce the volume. We can do it. I could give you a whole list of ways we can reduce the volume of sludge. And then amend the federal rules that classify PFAS in ways like the CERCLA is the Superfund rule. So it means the polluter pays, not the public. And we have to use the federal regulations we have. And right now it's not looking very hopeful that we're going to have federal regulations that have any teeth with regard to a family of chemicals like PFAS. But for instance, the new administration, they scrapped 4 out of the 6 PFAS that were part of the Biden administration's final rule for drinking water. They didn't get rid of all of them. And I think that's because millions of Americans can't drink their water. Towns across the country, and regions across the country, like here, I asked, and you all raised your hand, and about, that you knew about this family of chemicals. So we're making progress here. Unfortunately, we're making progress in part because a lot of people have suffered from PFAS poisoning or their friends, families, neighbors. And then make funding available for farmers and communities harmed by PFAS contaminated sewage sludge. And here's some resources. I particularly would like to point out Hiroko Tabuchi's articles in the New York Times. There's about 12 of them that are terrific, really, really good. The Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, PEER, has been leading the charge on this. The Maine Organic Farmer and Growers Association, MOFGA, has been doing just yeoman's work on this. I am I'm a contributing editor and board member of a little publication called The Barn Raiser, barnraisingmedia.com. And I referenced an article by Bill Pluker, who's the lawmaker in Maine who wrote the ban for land application of sludge, where he wrote about how to prevent PFAS poisoning in your garden. And then there have been some TV documentaries and television. Yes, I am a minor star in the PFAS documentary world, and I will do autographs if anybody's interested. And then this is Just Zero's social. So that's it from me, but thank you all for listening, and let's talk. Say? Quabbin water, Eastern Massachusetts. Water is from the Quabbin Reservoir from Central Mass, and yes, it is keeping your water, your source of your water is really important. In New York City, in Boston, for instance, source of their water has no industrial or wastewater discharges. So yes, PFAS free.
If anyone has a question, I can bring you the microphone so that people can hear online.
Thank you, Laura. You mentioned that it could be in the water. Will a reverse osmosis filter take out the PFAS in drinking water?
The answer is yes. So the question is, will reverse osmosis remove PFAS from drinking water? Yes. It depends what PFAS we're talking about, but the regulated PFAS, like the PFOA and PFOS, it does a very good job of that, especially when it's used in conjunction with carbon filtration. So I mentioned these point of entry treatment systems, which is your whole household, like all the water you shower with and cook with and drink. Those will often have activated carbon filters and reverse osmosis. So yeah.
Have you thought through where this sludge goes if it doesn't go on land? Oftentimes, things that don't go on land go in the ocean.
Well, sewage sludge used to go in the ocean on the major cities that were on the ocean. It was put out in barges and dumped out. And in the 1980s, a bunch of in New Jersey and New York, a bunch of municipal solid waste washed up on the beaches, including needles. Now remember, the AIDS crisis was really just unfolding. And that got a lot of press. People were like, oh my God, there's needles on the beach and all kinds of other garbage. They're using our oceans as a dump. And sewage sludge got wrapped up into all of that. And so the rules that were promulgated in 1993 for the land application of sewage sludge, they're called the Part 503s under the Clean Water Act, said you can't dump that in the ocean anymore. It should go on land. It should be beneficially used. And that's the beginning of this sad story, actually, because where sludge should go is out of the life cycles. We shouldn't drink it, we shouldn't eat it, or the products that are grown or come in contact with it. And so what do we do with it? We make less of it whenever possible. Anaerobic digestion will reduce volumes by 50%, et cetera. And then we put it in landfills. And we take out the things in landfills that doesn't need to be there. Food waste. 30% of what goes in landfills in the United States are food scraps. 30%. Right? That causes greenhouse gas. Its volume of landfills is taken up. Take bottles and cans out. Pass bottle bill laws. They're very successful. They can reduce the bottles and cans going into landfills by 90%. Take out the cardboard. We actually know how to recycle cardboard. Right? So now I'm talking about more than 50% of what goes in landfills from just those three things will create more space for the stuff that should go in the landfill, like the poisons that are in sewage sludge.
Why don't we take a couple of questions from people online? So I'll have Chelsea read those.
So I think you've actually answered some of these already. I have a bit of a side conversation going on here.
Or if not, we can jump back.
So one question is, can you comment on the class of bacteria that have dehalogenase? Does that sound right?
A class of bacteria in what?
That have dehalogenase enzymes that are able to break down these chemicals.
So I think the question is about a particular species of bacteria that can break down, I'm assuming, PFAS? That would be in the context of this conversation, right? So we haven't found anything that destroys PFAS. There's some bench science, right? But burning it doesn't destroy it, no matter how high the temperatures, they're just like poof, the PFAS doesn't go away, right? So there's bench science of looking at ways to break it down. Nothing has been brought to scale. So I'm super interested in all of that. I'm interested in the work of bacteria. I'm interested in any other technique, different kinds of filtration systems. So when we talk about, anytime you see destroy PFAS, just like that's not a thing. Removing PFAS, yeah. Filtering it out, yeah, that's a real thing. And where I get my best information is looking at what drinking water authorities are doing. The people who have to provide safe drinking water to us and the scientists that follow that and look what's really happening with the filtration systems and such, there's some good information about what can and can't be done. And I tell you what, if we could just poof, make it go away, it would be pretty great, but that's not happened so far. Maybe Disney. There's somebody in the back.
Yes, Sherry?
Hello?
It doesn't project into the room, it's just projecting to the people online. So you have to both project and speak.
Okay, great, thank you. How close should I hold? Okay, really, I think you may have answered this question, but I sort of want to hear it again and maybe a little bit more about it. But if a farmer has used it on their land, sludge, is there a way for them to remove it and still stay in business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are people who know a lot more than I do about this, but Maine is a place to really look. They found sewage sludge, if it depending on the level of processing, and the processing is about pathogens and odor, okay? Not synthetic chemicals like PFAS. But if there's odor reduction and pathogen reduction, the regulators call it Class A, right? Nobody knows where that goes. There's no permit. I mean, Massachusetts, the Deer Island, it goes to 12 different states and Canada. We know that, but not where. At least that was in 2022. And Class B is the stuff that's dewatered, but maybe not heated up to reduce pathogens or otherwise processed so it doesn't stink as bad. That's permitted, right? But that's a very clunky, bureaucratic system, but there's 70 million acres that have been permitted to have Class B sewage sludge put on it. So if a farmer knows that sludge was put, or maybe they just didn't know how bad it was, in Maine, they've found 87 contaminated farms. Of those, they're very proud of the fact that only 5 have been shut down. And so it depends on the level of contamination. It depends on the soil type. It depends on how much the water's contaminated. In University of Maine, in other research institutions, including the state of Maine, are looking at what plants take it up. Can you plant something else? And then that plant becomes a biohazard, but it's taken out of the soil. And there's been some successes with that. Cow's milk. Misty Brook Farm in Maine, an organic dairy, they found out, they tested, nobody told them they had to, and they found high levels of milk in their cows. And I don't know if you all know dairy farmers, but they like their cows, and they didn't want to, what they call cull their herd. So they didn't. They got different cows so they could keep their business going, but they didn't kill their cows. In those cows, I have to, within a year, maybe 2, but I think it was a year, had no measurable PFAS in their milk because it moved through the milk. And now they were throwing that out. I don't know what they did with it. They weren't selling it, I tell you that. But that is, that kind of information is information that we can work with. Like, you don't have to kill all your cows, folks, but your milk is a biohazard for a year or whatever that number was. It wasn't years. So we're working on it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one other sort of quickie, which is forever chemicals, forever. 15,000 chemicals, that could vary quite a lot, but kind of in general, do we have a number? I'm thinking of radium poisoning is like 1,100 years or something like that. So,
How long they stick around?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some research of, they don't break down. You know what I mean? We have a lot of things, glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, actually breaks down into other constituents, other things that and over time becomes less poisonous in the soil. The PFAS, that carbon-fluorine bond, which wreaks havoc on our bodies and in animals' bodies, those don't break. And we were talking about like some methods to try, but that's all bench science right now. So they call them forever because they don't break, they move. Short chain PFAS with fewer carbon tend to be a lot more mobile. They'll move into the water. Depending on the carbon content and what's grown, it'll move into the plant. So they don't break. So there's no farm remediation, like apart from trying to take all the soil out, which is ridiculous. So you got to take it up somehow.
Thank you.
You bet. Somebody back there? Oh, yeah, hi.
Hello. So as we see with carbon in the atmosphere, and we continue to pump record oil and gas production, even though we have evidence of global warming, are we making progress in PFAS manufacturing, or are they continuing to manufacture it, and is it being produced at greater levels every year?
I guess overall, we're making progress. 3M said they're going to stop producing it. I know people say that that's not true. They've kept up manufacturing. There's been a voluntary phase out of PFOA and PFOS in manufacturing. Internationally, it's still manufactured, and we still find PFAS in our products. But there are organizations like Clean and Healthy and Sierra Club and many others that are trying to get PFAS, for instance, out of our packaging. That's pretty low-hanging fruit. Like, why wrap our chicken in this stuff, right? And so that means less of a market for these companies. And then the big thing has been lawsuits, successful lawsuits of billions of dollars that you hit the pocketbook, and that's why 3M has claimed that they're going to stop manufacturing PFAS, because they're billions of dollars paying out to water utilities in a successful lawsuit against them for knowingly poisoning public water systems. So.
One second, do you mind repeating?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If you go for your blood work at the doctor's, can you request to be tested for these?
That depends place to place. Some doctors will say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how to do that. And then you go to a place like Maine where there's a lot of known PFAS poisoning, and there are, local doctors, country doctors, people who'll say, sure, we know how to do that. So you got to ask,
If we're using filtration at our homes to get it out of our water, how is it the safest way to get rid of the filters that it's now trapped in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So if we're filtering PFAS, say in our homes, out of our water, then it's in the filter, right? Or the reject, what they call the reject water, if you use reverse osmosis and the filter. That's a toxic waste. So it's concentrated, which is good. We're trying to keep it out of the life cycles, remember? So then those filters need to be properly sequestered, if you will. And so For instance, if the filters go in a lined landfill, then the leachate from that landfill has to then again be filtered, right? You're creating more concentration and concentration and concentration, but at least it's not going into our rivers, streams, and drinking water. So it's a prickly problem, but I mean, I think the big thing is keep it out of our bodies and out of our animals' bodies and out of those life cycles, and let's then stop manufacturing them, stop using them.
Are there, disregarding the forever chemicals in biosolids, are there any known benefits to applying it even, or is it all a hoax and a marketing scheme?
That's an interesting question. So are there known benefits to applying sewage sludge or biosolids, right? There is nitrogen and there is phosphorus in sewage sludge, measurable amounts. So the answer is there are, I guess, resources, if you will. There are nutrients that are available to plants that are in sewage sludge. But sewage sludge always also has PFAS and all kinds of endocrine disrupting chemicals, et cetera, always in it. So, and there is no way to extract, like for instance, the phosphorus without, I just recently read a paper on this, without extracting the microplastics and PFAS. So there's no clean, way to do it. And so, people have proposed to me that, God, can't we just mine the sludge for the good stuff? And if it was just human excreta, we could, but we're talking about industrial, the sewers are the industrial pollution, the sink for all the industrial chemicals that we use in our society. And we pretend that the wastewater treatment plant is cleaning it up, but over the decades when we're using millions and millions and millions of pounds of these synthetic chemicals, we're just then spewing them out, and we can't disaggregate them from this particular, material.
I have one question and then a comment that I think should be discussed. So do you know if areas with consistent fire suppression, like parts of California, are being tested for PFAS, or is all that hectares assumed to have high levels of PFAS? Are there known impacts on vegetation, plants, or insects?
That's a two-part question. So fire suppression, for instance, in California, I've wondered that myself. I don't know. Don't know the answer to that. I don't even know why it's pink. In the pictures, it's always pink, right? I don't know why. I don't think it has anything to do with flamingos, but I'm not sure. Yes, there's data, there's information about insects. There's something just came out about crickets, earthworms. There's information about how PFAS influences both soil, the life in soil ecosystems and living soil, so fungi, bacteria, but also the other creatures that are in soil, and then other insects and life that is, for instance, in a sludged field. There's data on that, and none of it's good.
And then the comment is, so bottom line, you have to assume that practically every farm has had sewage sludge applied to the land at some point in the past, and those chemicals persist to the current day.
That's not true. So then we have to assume that all fields, all farms have received sewage sludge, and those chemicals are persisting in the soil. That is not true. By any means. Plenty of people don't want this stuff. They've rejected it. There's not enough of it, thank God, to cover all farms in America. We can't give you an exact number because, like I mentioned, it's not all permitted, the stuff that goes out, but We can look at the 2,000 largest wastewater treatment plants, really even the 100 largest wastewater treatment plants have some idea, we have a very good idea how much sludge they produce. And we know that half of it is going into landfills. So we have really good, pretty decent ideas of how much sludge is produced and how much of it goes in landfills and how much is land applied. And it's not even, it's, you know, I hate to get, I don't want to really give a number, but it's, if I had to right now, I'd say 10% or something like that, potentially. But what happens, Los Angeles has their own farm. It's called Green Acres. And they bring hundreds of tons of their sewage sludge to this so-called farm in Kern County. And they dump it on the farm and they grow crops there. Denver does the same thing. I just looked at a database and there are 67 sites in California that in California does follow Class A and Class B sewage sludge. And what that says to me, if the data is correct, if the data set's correct, in California, when they land apply sewage sludge, they're putting it in these places like Green Acres owned by the city or big ranches in Southern California, rangelands. It's not going to little farmer here and there and here and there and here and there. And the same in Maine. You know, there's over 7,000 farms in Maine and they've identified 87. There are more, but it's not 7,000 farms in Maine. And as I mentioned, a really important, organic farmers do not use this material. I grew up in a farm family in Michigan, and plenty of people around us, including my family, is like, we don't want that stuff. Not knowing what it was, way before PFAS was on the radar screen. We don't want that stuff. That's not manure, right? And so there are plenty of people that feel that way as well. So this is not a hopeless situation at all.
Someone asks, do you know of other municipalities who are trying to change what they do with their biosolids? Williamstown / North Adams seems to be waiting for the regulations to change. And I'll just add to this question and say that Beat is going to try to work on drafting some local bylaw text that municipalities could potentially adopt, and very grateful to Just Zero and Laura for having their lawyers take a look at what we create. So if this is of interest to you, you should be in touch with us afterwards, but I'll pass that to Laura.
Yes, there are many. In fact, there are several counties in New York State that have recently passed bans on land application, Steuben County, Albany County, a few others. And Just Zero is in the fall going to have what we're calling a sludge toolkit that will be a kind of if, you know, the things that you're interested in terms of laws, passing laws, so that we don't have to reinvent the language each time. It's kind of like a hypertext toolkit that, you know, a modern decision-making tree that'll help communities tackle this issue without having to reinvent the wheel each time. And so that'll be coming out in the fall.
Thank you. Okay, last question.
All right, this is going to be a little long. Number one, I'm from Quincy, Mass. I'm a full-time firefighter.
Yes.
It's in our gear.
Yes.
Quincy's leading the fight on getting it out of our gear.
Yes.
Two, you talked about water from the Quabbin. They were going into open lakes and ponds or retention areas. Now the MWRA has made them all tankless. So the water goes from the Quabbin into tanks to protect the water, because animals, deer, anything else that can fall into it could have PFAS, and it goes into our drinking water. Going on drinking water, continuing, when you get rid of your filters, you should go to, we have Clean Harbors in Quincy, Mass. Twice a year, they take chemicals. That's where that should go. Your water filter should go to a company like that, because if you just throw it in the landfill, it's getting back exposed. On the landfills, well, Quincy seems to have built apartment buildings on top of the landfill. I'm wondering how that affects, you know, those apartment people. Go back into my notes here.
Sorry, did you just say they built apartments?
Yep. They built the condos and apartments on top of one of our Quincy landfills. And when I first moved to Quincy, I saw fires there and whatever. It was the release of gases from the landfill. And now there are apartment buildings on top of that landfill. And I'm wondering how that helps. In Quincy, as Laura probably knows, we have the New England fertilizer plant, where sludge is transferred into pellets and given out to the public. Not given, but sold. And I'm wondering how far that actually goes. I've been at a fire at that sludge plant.
Really?
The Howes Neck transfer station, which transfers sludge to the Deer Island. I've been at a fire at that plant also in Quincy. I've been exposed to the Home Depot fire that they had 20 years ago, where someone dropped some pool chemicals someplace else. And it just goes on. How about our own septic systems, Laura? I have a well at our house. I have a septic tank. How are we to do anything about that is my main question. You know, what do we do to protect ourselves from that?
Well, firstly, we got to stand with our firefighters and work with Quincy and people, firefighters on Nantucket and elsewhere who are trying to get this stuff out of their gear. And so stand with you, and we should help however we can. And it can be done, right? And in terms of septic, New Hampshire's done some interesting work on this, and it's the stuff we use to clean our clothes, and the stuff in the PFAS that comes off our clothes. So if you have a stain-resistant or water-resistant something and you put it through the wash, you may be shedding PFAS. And then there are some laundry products that have PFAS in them. I would probably go to the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, and see if they have something about particular products. They're pretty good about that. I don't know any offhand, but you're gonna have a lot less PFAS in septic tanks than you are in a sewer, right? And in terms of building on landfills and putting things on landfills, boy, that's a very long answer to that. But I wouldn't want to live there myself. So I know you asked a lot of questions.
But I've been fighting fires in those buildings too.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, you don't want to burn this stuff. It goes up into the air, you know.
Quincy's #1 in the state and also in the nation on fighting PFAS.
Yeah.
Has Massachusetts or the federal government established a toxic button for PFAS?
Only for 6 of them in drinking water, and the Trump administration has changed that to 2 of the 6, and they're going to revisit the other 4. That's
Makes a big hurdle in all of it.
yeah. There's not the air, plants, all of that. No, there are no regulatory numbers. But there is science that shows that there is no safe level in our bodies.
Well, I think that will be our concluding point. Thank you so much, Laura.
Okay, everybody say flamingo. All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
So much.